Hey guys, tonight we're taking a slow and slightly painful stroll back to medieval Europe, where dental care was less about hygiene and more about brute force. Imagine waking up to the sound of a town crier yelling about cabbage prices, a neighbor screaming from the courtyard, and the thick gagging scent of something boiling in an iron pot. No, it's not stew, it's teeth. Human teeth being cleaned, sold, and probably reused. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to drop your city and current time in the comments. I love seeing how far this sleepy little village reaches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to the creak of wagon wheels and a low, rhythmic chant outside your window. It's barely dawn, and the sky's the color of overcooked porridge. Peering through the warped glass, you see a hunched figure dragging a cart with one wheel too many and not enough grease, draped in oily rags and carrying a sack that audibly clinks with metal, bone, and glass. The figure stops in the center of the square, raises a gnarled hand, and cries out, "Tooth SS, rotten or fresh, silver or yanked, I treat, I pull, I sell for copper, for cloth, or kind words if you're pretty." Welcome to your first day as the assistant to a traveling tooth merchant. Though calling him a dentist might be generous, his name, or at least the one he answers to this week, is Old Gervais. He claims to have studied under a barber surgeon in Paris, which might be true, if by studied he means hid under a bench while someone cut off a leg. Your role is simple. Hold the head still, hand over the tools, and keep the bucket from tipping. You're also in charge of the smelling salts, though Gervais says they're a waste of good mint. Your first customer of the day is a fishmonger with breath so potent it could fell a mule. He leans back on a hay bale, opens wide, and points to a molar that's clearly past saving. Gervais doesn't inspect so much as nod with vague confidence and jam two fingers in. The tools are laid out on a filthy cloth, pliers shaped like they were meant for horseshoes, a narrow spike for lancing abscesses, and what Gervais calls the tooth winch, a twisted iron crank used to lever out stubborn roots. You hand him the pliers. He spits on them first, maybe for luck, maybe for lubrication, and in they go. The sound is not great. A wet crunch, a dull snap, and a noise that can only be described as a scream muffled by fish scales. When the tooth finally comes loose, it's coated in blood pulp, and what might be yesterday's eel pie. Gervais holds it aloft like a trophy. The crowd claps politely. Your next patient is a child with a loose front tooth. Gervais doesn't bother with tools. He offers her a boiled sweet, then yanks it mid-bite. The tooth comes out with a pop, and the girl looks more confused than hurt. Payment, a kiss on the cheek, and her mother's promise not to spread the plague gossip this time. You've barely cleaned the blood from your hands, using the official dental rag, which smells like old sausage, when a wealthy cloth merchant approaches. He's not here for a pull, he wants to buy teeth. Apparently, his wife's ivory dentures have chipped, and he prefers authentic replacements. Gervais opens his special pouch, full of sorted and semi-clean teeth harvested from the recently dead. Only the freshest molars, still warm when removed, he brags. The merchant selects 3 and pays in coin. You resist asking where the rest of the body is. By mid-afternoon, the square smells of sour breath, panic sweat, and cloves, the last being your attempt at aromatherapy by sprinkling crushed spice onto the rag. Gervais commends your initiative. You've got the hands for dentistry, he says, and the nose for surviving it. As the sun sets, your bucket of extracted teeth sloshes like a macabre soup. A local monk stops by, asks if any relic molars are available. He's decorating a shrine and wants something saintly. Gervais offers him a canine with a gold cap. The monk squints, sniffs it, and shrugs. Close enough. That night, you sleep next to the cart, wrapped in burlap, the bucket by your side. Gervais snores loudly under his wagon, muttering about molars and moon cycles. The stars above twinkle coldly, and you wonder, what did people do before tooth merchants like him roamed the land? Then you remember, they died screaming with toothaches. The next morning begins with a slap, delivered not to your face, thankfully, but to the flank of the donkey pulling your cart. Gervais calls it motivational dentistry, which is not encouraging. The sky is already humming with heat, and the village well is surrounded by women whispering, children scratching, and one unfortunate fellow cupping his jaw and moaning theatrically. You help Gervais pack the tools, some still sticky from yesterday, and set off down a rutted road toward the next town. Along the way, he decides it's time you learn a little history. Back in my day, he says, teeth didn't hurt because we didn't know they could. You nod. He's not wrong. The truth is, medieval people had ideas, theories, very confident ones, most of them hilariously wrong, and chief among them was the toothworm. You learn that for centuries, Europeans believed toothaches were caused by tiny worms that burrowed into your teeth and wriggled around whenever they were hungry, angry, or bored. These weren't metaphors. These were actual, imaginary, squirmy creatures thought to live inside your molars. Some thought you could lure them out by placing burnt henbane smoke against the aching tooth and listening for a faint squeal. Others swore by garlic, onion, or the music of a flute. You spend part of the day observing a local herbalist try all three at once. He smokes out the patient's mouth until they're coughing like a chimney, rubs onion juice on their gums, then plays an off-key tune on a wooden whistle. The patient does not feel better, but the herbalist declares success and charges 2 eggs and a kiss on the forehead. Later, a carpenter shows you a charm he wears around his neck, dried fox teeth, wrapped in red thread and supposedly blessed by a nun. Prevents decay, he claims proudly, while smiling through 3 visible cavities. You begin to notice how many people carry tooth charms, choose suspicious routes, or avoid smiling altogether. No one trusts the state of their own mouth, and everyone's convinced that a toothache is the devil's laughter. Some even believe tooth pain is divine punishment for gossip, theft, or falling asleep during Mass. But it isn't all superstition. Well, it's mostly superstition, but there are flickers of practical logic, too. You meet a village-wise woman who recommends rinsing with salt water and chewing mint leaves. Keeps your mouth holy, she says, tapping her toothless grin. Gervais, meanwhile, has his own theories. Pain's just guilt escaping the skull, he says one night while boiling tools in wine. Or maybe a worm. Depends on the moon. He's also convinced that eating too many pears makes your gums lazy, and that kissing a redhead cures halitosis. And then there's the traveling friar, who insists that tooth pain stems from impure thoughts. He offers to pray over your jaw, waving a relic that smells suspiciously like beef jerky. When Gervais suggests using vinegar and ash instead, the friar recoils in horror and mutters something about alchemy and eternal blisters. Historians still argue whether people genuinely believed in toothworms or if it was just a useful metaphor. Some medieval texts describe the worm as visible grayish-black, wriggling out of the tooth during treatments. Of course, modern scholars suspect these were either blood clots, nerves, or the contents of a rotted pulp chamber, but you wouldn't dare say that aloud. By the end of the week, you've heard enough conflicting advice to write your own grimoire. Rub frog bile on your molars. Sleep with garlic under your pillow. Don't yawn near a beggar or your jaw might stick. Avoid biting into cold apples unless you've made a proper offering to Saint Apollonia. Ah yes, Saint Apollonia, the patron saint of dentistry. Martyred by having her teeth pulled out with iron tongs, she's now the go-to intercessor for toothaches and desperate molar prayers. You see her image painted on church walls, carved in bone charms, and even burned into the handle of one particularly grim extraction tool. One night while camped outside a tavern, you try praying to her yourself. Your back aches, your hands smell like spit and copper, and you've begun to dream of molars chasing you through muddy fields. "Dear Saint Apollonia," you whisper, "please grant me a day without screaming, or at least a patient who doesn't bite." You think you hear a faint chuckle on the wind. Could be Gervais snoring, or maybe it's the toothworm laughing. At sunrise, you're woken by a sound you now recognize instantly. The wet, gristly schnick of pliers gripping enamel. Gervais is already up, squatting beside a coughing blacksmith, and humming tunelessly, while twisting a molar like he's trying to open a stubborn jar. You watch the sun rise behind him, casting a golden halo around the iron tongs. It's almost beautiful if you ignore the blood. After the extraction, Gervais stands and gestures proudly at his setup. "Today," he declares, "you will become one with the tools." You try to fake a coughing fit. No luck. He tosses you a rag and points at the greasy roll of instruments spread across a wine barrel. Here they are, the medieval dentist's toolkit, a collection of objects that look more like torture devices than anything intended for healing. You run your fingers over each one, Gervais grunting explanations as you go. First, the pelican. Not a bird, though it resembles one, in the way nightmares resemble birds. It's a curved clamp with a sliding bar, used to grip and rock a tooth out of the socket. If the name sounds gentle, the use is not. Most patients faint before the third crank. Then, the tooth key, a long T-shaped device with a metal claw at the end. You hook it around the base of the tooth, then twist. In theory, it rotates the tooth out cleanly. In practice, it usually shatters something, jawbones sometimes, hopes frequently. There's the dental chisel, ideal for cracking open abscesses or shaving down sharp edges of broken teeth. It's small and sharp enough to terrify a squirrel. You practice tapping it into a turnip. It slices through easily. You make a mental note not to let Gervais use it on you under any circumstances. For more delicate work, if such a thing exists, there's the elevator, a flat metal blade you wedge between the tooth and gum to loosen it. In trained hands, it works wonders. Gervais is not one of those hands. And don't forget the iron swab stick, basically a hot poker used to cauterize bleeding gums. You wave this, Gervais says, and people will sit still. Lastly, the ever-reliable pliers. Rusty, stained, and never quite the same size as the tooth you need to pull. Gervais has several pairs. One he calls Bessie for its comforting grip, and another he nicknamed the Persuader. You ask why. He doesn't answer, just grins. After you finish laying everything out, Gervais gives you your own apron, a tattered thing with more stains than fabric, and claps you on the shoulder. Time to earn your spit. Your first solo assist comes in the form of a traveling juggler with a cracked front tooth. He wants it filed down to avoid frightening children. You do your best, using a rough stone and a whisper of regret. The tooth ends up looking like a melted candle, but the juggler seems satisfied. He even tips you a boiled chestnut. The next patient, a brewer, refuses to sit. "Just do it while I stand," he insists. Gervais shrugs and obliges. You watch, wide-eyed, as the man grips the rim of a bucket with both hands, growls like a bear, and allows his tooth to be pulled without flinching. You nearly applaud. But not all clients are so cooperative. A noblewoman arrives with 3 servants and a lace kerchief over her mouth. She complains of a throbbing in the back and demands a gentle touch. Gervais dons a clean tunic, a rare event, offers her a goblet of spiced wine, and proceeds to jab her gum with a hook. She faints before anything can be extracted, and her servants blame the peasant air. They leave in a huff. Gervais pockets the wine. Later, a boy no older than 10 comes in with swollen cheeks and tears in his eyes. His mother begs for help. Gervais takes one look and mutters something about grub rot. He motions for the tooth wench. You hand it over hesitantly. The boy grips your hand as the device is cranked. His scream echoes across the square. He doesn't let go of your hand for another hour. By nightfall, you've used every tool in the roll. You've cleaned them in vinegar, wine, even snowmelt. You've tied off a tongue nick, packed clove paste into a socket, and held down a man twice your size while Gervais extracted a wisdom tooth he should have left alone. And still, people line up. The tools, brutal as they are, have gained a sort of fame. Peasants whisper about the one with the iron birds. A merchant tries to buy Bessie from Gervais for 2 goats. Gervais declines. She's family. That night, by firelight, you polish each instrument in silence. You understand them now, not just how they work, but what they mean. Their fear and hope and desperation all wrapped in iron. They're proof that sometimes the cure is nearly as awful as the illness. And as you drift off, apron crusted with dried blood, and one of Bessie's screws jingling in your pocket, you find yourself dreaming of pliers again. Only this time, the tooth pulls you. Your eyes open to rain. Not the gentle, poetic kind, but sideways, slanting, cold as pickled eels rain that soaks your bedding, your boots, and your sense of dignity. Gervais has already moved the cart under a lopsided awning. He's chewing what may or may not be a piece of salted horse jerky and humming a cheerful dirge. "Good weather for worms," he says, spitting into the mud. "Today we go to the forest village." You know the one. A grim little cluster of moss-covered huts, tucked deep in the woods and known for its snakes, its cider, and its particularly violent toothaches. Gervais claims the place is cursed. You suspect it's the cider. The road is half flooded, and by the time you arrive, your cart axle is mudlocked, and your sleeves smell of mildew and disappointment. But the villagers are waiting. They always are. Faces twisted in pain, hands clutched to jaws, rumors of a forest sickness that starts in the molars and ends in madness. Today, you're not just assisting, you're leading. Gervais gives you the nod. "Trial by jungle," he mutters. "Time you stood on your own 2 molars." Your first patient is a woodcutter whose lower jaw looks like it's auditioning for a horror play. Swollen gums, blackened teeth, and a breath that could warp wood. You try to inspect gently, but he jerks back and yells something about moss spirits. Gervais suggests an old trick honey boiled with nettles and goat bone. "Makes him drowsy," he says. "The mixture smells like betrayal." The woodcutter drinks it. 10 minutes later, he's asleep in your lap, and you manage to extract 2 rotten molars before he even snores. You're feeling confident, until the next patient. A woman in her 50s, eyes sharp as a hawk, who insists she needs all her teeth removed. All of them. Today, she believes they're possessed. You try to reason with her. She produces a sack of silver and a letter signed by Saint Apollonia herself. Gervais shrugs, better out than cursed. You manage 7 teeth before she asks you to name each one as it comes out. You name the last one Kevin. She thanks you and leaves whistling. Midday brings the snakes. Not metaphorical ones, real ones. A boy has been bitten while gathering moss and now presents with a fever and a gum infection. You stare at him. This is not in the handbook. 2 options, says Gervais, poultice and prayer or pull and run. You choose poultice. You mash herbs, spit, and a splash of cider into a greenish paste and pack it onto the boy's gum. He moans, then falls asleep. You cover him with your cloak. The villagers are impressed. Word spreads that you tamed the serpent child. A man gives you half a rabbit in thanks. It's still twitching. Afternoon brings your most difficult case yet. The village midwife. She has a cracked molar, infected and dangerously close to the jawline. She also has authority and a large stick. She lets you work on one condition, no tools. You're forced to improvise. You use a sliver of antler as a pick, a shard of flat stone as a mirror, and warm cider as rinse. You clean the wound. You wrap it in cloth. She doesn't scream once. When you finish, she says, "You're better than the last one." You ask what happened to him. She gestures to the forest and mutters, "Wolves." Evening comes, and you're muddy, shivering, and somehow respected. Gervais hands you a flask and toasts your survival. "They like you," he says. "That's either good for your reputation or bad for your bones." You nod. You're too tired to tell the difference. That night, you dream of a jungle where every tree has teeth. They chatter as you walk past. One opens wide and asks for Kevin. At long last, the sun is shining, and not the reluctant, cloud-strangled drizzle you're used to, but honest golden warmth, the kind that makes peasants hum, chickens lay twice, and toothaches, well, still ache, but perhaps with less dramatic flair. You're in a border village today. It straddles two duchies, and neither wants to claim it. The accents are mixed, the coinage confusing, and the laws about dentistry practically non-existent, which is, naturally, the perfect place for a public demonstration. Gervais has promised something never before attempted on dry land, which you suspect is how he introduces every procedure. This time, though, the crowd is large and rowdy, drawn by rumors of a duel. You're handed a horn to blow. It's sticky and smells like fermented parsnip. You announce the event: 1 patient, 2 teeth, 3 tools, no prayers. They cheer. The patient, as it turns out, is a farmer with a jaw like a cliff and a grudge against chewing. He approaches the barrel stage in silence, points to 2 upper molars, and crosses his arms. He's ready. Gervais, always a showman, selects 3 tools: the pelican, the chisel, and Bessie. "You choose," he tells the crowd. They chant for Bessie. And so begins the duel. You take the lead, gripping the pliers and leaning in. The farmer doesn't flinch. You twist, pull, and snap. Not the tooth, the handle. Bessie is broken in half. The crowd gasps. Gervais faints for drama. You scramble. With shaking hands, you switch to the chisel and gently wedge it against the tooth. The farmer raises an eyebrow. You tap it once, twice, then crack. The tooth splits neatly. With a pair of tongs and a prayer you refuse to say aloud, you extract both halves. Applause erupts. A child throws you a wilted daisy. Gervais rises from his pretend faint, dusts off his cloak, and declares it the most graceful extraction east of Chartres. Your fame is sealed. But it doesn't end there. That evening, a local bailiff arrives with an actual tooth challenge. Another dentist has been practicing nearby, claiming superior speed. His name is Brother Dietrich, and he's part monk, part blacksmith, part performance artist. A duel of technique is proposed. You and Brother Dietrich will each remove 1 molar from volunteers, in front of a neutral judge, the local innkeeper, who's drunk but alert. The winner gets a sack of flour and bragging rights. You go first. Your patient is an elderly woman who insists on humming during the procedure. You work delicately, using only the elevator. It takes longer, but she says she didn't feel a thing, except mild spiritual release. Dietrich goes next. His patient is a goat herder with suspiciously few teeth to begin with. Dietrich removes a molar in under 6 seconds by yanking with raw fingers and yelling for purity. The tooth comes out clean, but the herder faints. The judge, mouth full of pickled onions, declares a tie. That night, the 2 of you sit beside the fire, comparing tools. Dietrich shows you a tooth key carved from deer bone. You offer him a taste of your clove wine rinse. You swap horror stories about cheek abscesses and accidental mustache burnings. You decide to become rivals but cordial. The next morning, the village honors both of you with a breakfast of boiled wheat and slightly cursed jam. A child asks if you can pull a splinter. You oblige with tweezers. On the way out, Gervais hands you a wrapped bundle. Inside is a new pair of pliers. Still Bessie, he says, just taller. You feel something stir, a strange pride. You're no longer just a helper, you're a contender. And so, with sun on your face and molars in your pouch, you trudge to the next village, where a baker's jaw has swollen to the size of a pumpkin. You arrive at the next town under a sky so gray it feels like the weather itself is bracing for a toothache. The local baker, a rotund man known only as Master Crumb, meets you at the gate with one hand on his swollen cheek and the other gripping a rolling pin like a cudgel. "I've tried onions, I've tried prayers, I even gargled with vinegar steeped in shoe leather," he mumbles. "Nothing works, fix it or bury me." Gervais bows grandly. "Let it be known that today pain shall rise and bread shall fall." You follow Master Crumb into the kitchen, a flour-caked cavern of ovens, crusty pans, and 3 confused cats. He plops onto a bench, opens his mouth, and tilts his head back. What you see is not a molar. It's a mountain, infected, cracked, and pushing against his jaw like it's trying to escape. Gervais calls it a royal root. You call it a potential lawsuit. First things first, you need leverage. The new pliers, taller, sturdier, still called Bessie, are unwrapped with reverence. You heat them slightly to dull the chill. Meanwhile, Crumb refuses any numbing tonic but accepts a swig of old mead for courage. He bites down on a rag. You count to 3. On 2, you strike. The molar doesn't come out so much as explode, a splintery burst of decay, pus, and what may have once been a sesame seed. Crumb's scream is short, his feint is long. You lay him gently onto sacks of rye flour and pack the socket with cinnamon bark. Gervais's idea. "Smells like healing," he says. But news of your dramatic success spreads. People pour in. A shepherd with molar moss, a mason with lichen growing on his gums, a nobleman who insists his teeth hum at night. You're overwhelmed. The town hasn't had a proper toothsmith in years, and now they have 2 if you count Gervais, which they do, mostly because of his feathered hat. You're forced to set up a triage bench. You sort patients into 3 categories: loose and easy, may be salvageable, and may require divine intervention. In the loose and easy line, you pull 7 teeth before lunch. 1 is gold-capped, you return it grudgingly. The maybe salvageable group includes a weaver whose back molar wobbles when she sneezes. You fill it with crushed oyster shell and beeswax. She kisses your cheek and offers free mittens. But the last category, oh, the last. One man has a gum abscess the size of a quail egg. He asks if it's safe to lance with a dinner fork. You say no, you use a sanitized chisel instead, and the resulting spray stains your sleeves permanently. A woman claims she swallowed a tooth in her sleep and now dreams in Latin. Gervais recommends fasting and fennel. You recommend sleep on her side. A priest insists a possessed bicuspid is speaking through him. You listen. The tooth is surprisingly well read. Evening comes and the bakery is transformed. Gone are the pies and bread. In their place, bloodied cloths, herbal salves, a pot of boiling tools, and a large crate labeled X-teeth. You've worked 12 hours without pause. You collapse beside the hearth, your hands shaking from effort and clove oil. Gervais sits beside you, munching on something unidentifiable. "You did well," he says. "Most apprentices quit when the molar explodes." You nod. You're beyond words. Outside, the wind rises. A knock at the door. It's a child, no older than 8, holding a note. "The mayor," she says. "He needs you urgently." You sigh, rise, and grab the bag. In this town, the dentist never sleeps. The mayor's house is much grander than you expected. Thick stone walls, a roof that doesn't leak, and a servant who greets you with a sneeze and a look of permanent judgment. You follow her through a series of winding halls, past tapestries of heroic turnip harvests and portraits of stern-looking ancestors with unusually wide jaws. The mayor himself is in bed, propped up on goose-feather pillows, wrapped in at least 3 cloaks despite the heat of the fire. He groans as you enter, one hand cradling his face like it might detach at any moment. "My 3rd molar," he moans, "it sings at night." You exchange a glance with Gervais, who whispers, "Ghost molar, tricky." But it's not a ghost, as it turns out. It's a simple impaction, made worse by years of chewing sugar plums and issuing declarations with clenched teeth. You ask the mayor to open wide. He refuses. You ask again. He opens slightly. You threaten to leave. He opens like a catapult. Inspection reveals not only a severely infected tooth, but also the source of his sleep deprivation. The pain has spread to his jaw, his temple, and, somehow, his patience. Gervais insists on preparing the treatment room himself, which in this case is the mayor's guest library. He sets out tools on a velvet footstool, lights a beeswax candle for spiritual steadiness, and places an embroidered doily beneath the extraction bowl. You begin to understand why nobles charge more for everything. Even their dental blood must fall decoratively. The mayor finally shuffles in, flanked by 2 retainers and a lapdog that sneezes continuously. He lies back on a chaise. You approach with Bessie. He stops you. Wait, how does a dentist begin his day? You blink. By washing his hands? No, he whispers, with tea. And so you wait 15 minutes while the servant prepares lukewarm chamomile with honey. He sips, he sighs, then he nods and you proceed. You brace the pliers around the molar. It's seated deep, like a noble squatter refusing eviction. You twist slowly. The mayor groans. You adjust. You twist again. And suddenly, it gives. The tooth comes loose with a sickening pop, followed by a thin dribble of dark fluid, and one squeaky sigh from the lapdog. The mayor slumps back, eyes wide, mouth hanging open in disbelief. You pack the socket with crushed sage and rosewater-soaked wool. Gervais compliments your finesse. Didn't even break the chaise, he notes. The mayor thanks you with a half-smile. You are, he says, the least disagreeable man I've ever allowed into my mouth. You take it as a compliment. But this procedure, demanding, delicate, performed under velvet, marks a shift in your practice. Word spreads not just of your skill, but your courtly manner. Within days, you receive invitations from lesser nobles, rich merchants, and one opera singer who insists you pull her bicuspid in the key of D minor. You begin developing a routine. Every morning, you sharpen the chisel using a whetstone and an Ave Maria. Soak the linen wraps in clove oil and crushed mint. Whisper affirmations to Bessie, we don't break today. Practice your smile in a polished copper pot. Gervais, meanwhile, handles the crowds. He introduces you as master of molars, defender of gums, lord of the lower jaw. You tell him to stop. He adds tooth whisperer instead. Your typical day now includes 3 extractions. 1 failed self-remedy consultation today, beeswax and nettles. At least 2 people asking if you talk to teeth. 1 philosopher who insists that cavities are a metaphor for original sin. And always a line of peasants bearing rumors. A cow with unusually sharp molars. A skull that smiles by itself. A child born with a full set of baby teeth, and a mysterious birthmark shaped like a tooth key. You begin keeping notes, tiny sketches, fragments of dental wisdom, things you overhear. Your journal is growing fat, and somewhere in your tired, mint-scented heart, you wonder if you're becoming more than just a dentist. Maybe a chronicler. Maybe a legend. Maybe just someone too tired to argue. That night, as you wash your hands in rose water and scrape dried pulp from your sleeves, you look into the candlelight and imagine a future, one where teeth don't scream, tools don't rust, and every mayor drinks his tea before treatment. The next morning begins with a shriek. Not of pain, though that comes later, but a shriek of pure, unfiltered loathing. It echoes through the square, bounces off the bakery, rattles a rooster off a windowsill, and dives straight into your soul. You run outside, tools in hand, still tying your apron, and skid to a halt at the sight of a furious woman in a velvet gown, pointing directly at your cart. More specifically, at the elephant blanket Gervais stitched into a makeshift curtain. This, she spits, was my tablecloth. Gervais peeks out from behind the cart and offers a polite cough. It's also your husband's blood, dual purpose. That woman is Lady Isabel, the wife of a minor lord, proud patron of the arts and, unfortunately, the region's most vocal opponent of dentistry. Especially yours. I want him out of the town, she says, jabbing a finger at Gervais, and you out of the mouths of the innocent. You blink. You've heard complaints? She glares. I've heard everything. That you boiled someone's molars with rosemary, that you hum hymns while lancing, that you gave my nephew a tooth made of bone. It was ivory, you correct a little too quickly, polished. Isabel whirls, her velvet cape flaring like a furious shadow, and storms away. Gervais scratches his beard. Might be time we talked about your reputation. You have become, in a word, polarizing. The peasants adore you. The clergy tolerates you. The nobility is, at best, divided. And then there's Isabel, who starts a petition to replace you with a man of science or at least decent handwriting. To make matters worse, her vendetta goes personal. She bans you from the public square, claiming your extractions scare the pigeons. She posts handwritten warnings outside the apothecary. This man once touched an incisor with a meat knife. She even files a formal complaint with the town council, listing offenses like wearing bloodied aprons in a residential zone, referring to molars as mischievous beasts, whistling during cauterization. You're called to a hearing. The chamber smells like dust and suspicion. Isabel is seated beside a man with a powdered wig and a monocle made of seashell. Gervais testifies in your defense. He is not helpful. Have people died under his care, he says. Of course, but not recently. Somehow, the council lets you off with a warning. You go quiet after that. You stop humming. You scrub your apron daily. You return borrowed tablecloths. And still, she circles. And yet, despite everything, people keep coming. Your work continues in alleyways, in basements, by candlelight in inns and barns. You become, paradoxically, more popular. Patients whisper about your exile with reverence. He's underground now, they say, a tooth rebel. You lean into it. You fashion a mask out of a flour sack. You carry your tools in a hollowed-out book. Gervais calls you the molar phantom. You don't correct him. One night, while hiding beneath a grain silo after an emergency wisdom tooth procedure, you hear a rustle. It's Isabel. She's holding her cheek. Her eyes are red-rimmed. She doesn't speak for a long while. Finally, it's my back left. Hurts when I drink anything warm or breathe. You nod. No mockery, no gloating. Just you, your tools, and the dim lantern glow. You work silently. Her molar is cracked, inflamed, and clinging on with spite. You remove it with soft hands and a little prayer. She doesn't scream. Afterward, she whispers, "Don't tell anyone." You nod again. Only if you return the blanket. She leaves without a word. The next morning, the warning signs are gone. The pigeons return, and someone anonymously delivers fresh cloth to the cart. You're polishing your new tongue depressors, 2 butter knives sanded down to gentle curves, when Gervais stumbles into the tent with a gleam in his eye and a scroll in his hand. "Change of plans," he says, breathing heavily. "We've been hired, big job, big money, big walls." You glance at the scroll. It bears the seal of a minor duke whose crest depicts a badger gnawing a wheat stalk. You read aloud, "To the esteemed master of the molars and his associate, you are hereby summoned to oversee a structural reassessment of our house mouths." You blink. House mouths? Gervais grins. All of them. Every servant, every knight, every noble. 50 mouths, 3 days, paid in coin, room, and goat cheese. You pack your kit. The journey to the castle takes 2 days. The road winds through fog-choked hills and past statues with missing teeth, some carved, some broken. You arrive at dusk. The castle gates creak open to reveal a courtyard already lined with servants holding their jaws. A steward greets you. His Grace believes in oral harmony, he says stiffly. He wishes his household to be refreshed. Refreshed, it turns out, means purged. The Duke, an aging man with the energy of an overcooked beet, has grown obsessed with mouth energy. He believes that tooth decay causes discord. He's been reading pamphlets from Italy. Your workspace is a former armory. You're given a wooden chair, a sack of cloves, and a 2-person medical team consisting of a timid monk and a retired falconer. You begin immediately. The first day is servants. They file in, mouths open, breath varying wildly from stale porridge to burned stew mystery. You pull 12 teeth, fill 7 with crushed coral, and fashion 2 makeshift dentures from boiled leather. The falconer proves surprisingly useful, steady hands, 0 fear of blood. The monk less so, he faints during his own cleaning. The second day, guards. Braver, louder, and convinced pain is a myth. One insists on removing his own tooth with a dagger. You stop him with a firm no and a hotter iron. One man brings his sword and lays it on your lap for comfort. You endure shouting, biting, and one accidental headbutt. You save a molar using a chicken bone splint. You extract a molar that's fused to the jawbone. You stitch a split gum with thread meant for tunics. By sunset, your arms are jelly and your boots are pink. And then come the nobles. Perfumed, powdered, and panicking. One woman asks if you'll use gold forceps. One man insists his teeth be spoken to before removal. A third brings her own linen cloth and demands you wear gloves made of lambskin. Gervais takes over distractions. He sings lullabies, he juggles teeth, he pretends to faint just to reset the mood. You extract 4 noble teeth, each more dramatic than the last. You survive a slap, 2 faintings, and 1 very suspicious sneeze that sounds like fraud. At last, the Duke himself. He lies reclined on a throne-like chaise. His mouth somehow is perfect, gleaming, no swelling, no pain. So why am I here, you ask? He stares into the distance. My dreams, he murmurs, they whisper of rot, invisible, beneath the enamel. You nod slowly, you tap his teeth gently, nothing. You decide to polish, carefully, reverently. He moans softly, yes, chase it out. You finish, he sighs, I feel born. You are paid in coin, goat cheese, and a velvet pouch of uncut garnets for the gums. On your way out, the steward pulls you aside. He'll call you again, he says. He always does. Next time it'll be his dream molars again. Just nod, it's safer. As the castle disappears behind you, Gervais unwraps the cheese and declares it slightly haunted, but edible. You've earned your rest. You lie down beside the cart and dream of velvet gums and singing falcons. You're halfway through a blissfully toothless morning. No screaming, no pliers, just you and a cup of weak tea made from something Gervais swears is legal bark, when a boy rides up on a mule, dust in his hair and panic in his eyes. The Kalinga Fair, he gasps. There was a demonstration, a tooth-pulling contest. Something went wrong. They need help. You barely finish your tea before loading the cart. The Kalinga Fair is a yearly affair, half marketplace, half carnival, all chaos. Artisans juggle hammers, monks sell honeyed figs, and somewhere between the stilt walkers and the goat balance act, there's a crowd gathered in horrified silence. At its center, a man slumped over, drooling blood into a cooking pot. His left cheek is swollen like a rotten melon, and his right molar, still firmly lodged in his head. This, says the announcer, was meant to be entertainment. The dentist responsible, a shirtless man with 3 rings in one eyebrow, waves a bone tool and grins. Didn't go deep enough, he shrugs. The crowd parts for you and Gervais. You inspect the scene. The molar is broken halfway down. The root remains, now inflamed and possibly embedded in muscle. The man can't speak, but his eyes plead for intervention. You signal for water, clean cloth, and your sharpest elevator. It takes 20 minutes, 4 fresh compresses, and the kind of deep breath only a doomed man can take, but the root comes free. You hold it aloft. The crowd erupts. The announcer faints. The patient will live, though he'll whistle for a month. Gervais declares you savior of the fair. You receive a commemorative bunting flag and a basket of figs. You accept both with grace. But the drama has just begun. As you rest near the salt merchant's tent, a cloaked figure appears. Are you the molar one? You nod. My master requires discretion and urgency. You're led behind the livestock pens, through a narrow alley of spice tents, into a curtained booth filled with incense and velvet. Seated within, a woman in embroidered robes, eyes sharp as tongs. I am Lady Sangatha, she says, and I am here for vengeance. You nod again, more slowly. Not against a man, she adds. Against this. She opens her mouth and points to a deeply infected canine. It has betrayed me, she says. I demand its exile. You oblige carefully, gently, while she hums a war song under her breath. The tooth is stubborn but yields. She does not flinch. Afterward, she hands you a carved coin and whispers, you have earned favor. Should you need asylum, seek the House of 7 Doors. You don't know what that means. Gervais does. He stares at the coin for a long time. We're in deeper now, he murmurs, deeper than molars. Later, as the fair winds down, you're called to judge the tooth art contest. Entries include a necklace of baby teeth, a tiny sculpture of a pig made entirely from molars, a poem titled Ode to My Incisors, suspiciously plagiarized from the Psalms. You award the prize to a young girl who carved a toothbrush from plum wood. It's proactive, you say. By nightfall, you're exhausted, sticky with sugar and antiseptic, and somehow more famous than you were that morning. You and Gervais sit on the edge of a fountain, chewing candied walnuts and staring at the stars. We pulled a tooth at sunrise, he says, fought a revenge molar by noon, judged a poem by dusk. You nod, just another day in dentistry. He offers you the last walnut. You sleep that night under a vendor's tent, wrapped in bunting, dreaming of sculpted pigs and rebel teeth whispering your name. Your dream ends with applause and a molar bowing to the crowd. You awaken in a hayloft, with one side of your face numb. Not from a toothache, just a rather aggressive goat who's taken to sleeping beside you. You rise, dust yourself off, and stumble down the ladder, only to find Gervais already packing the cart with unsettling cheer. Today's a paperwork day, he says, no blood, just scrolls. You are immediately suspicious. You arrive at a town you've never seen before, orderly, clean, quiet. The kind of place where nothing interesting happens, and everyone has the same opinion about oat porridge. It's also where the regional guild is headquartered, the Honorable Fellowship of Toothsmiths, Tincturemen, and Allied Jaw Technicians. You're here to register, to become, in the eyes of bureaucracy, a licensed practitioner. At first, it seems simple. You're handed a quill, a form with 17 categories, and a waiting bench made of very judgmental wood. Then comes the examination. It begins with an oral interview. A clerk with a voice like a dripping tap asks questions like, describe the appropriate sequence for bicuspid removal in cases of pre-existing cheek ghosting. What are the legal flavors of rinse permitted during Lent? If a molar exhibits suspicious behavior during a waxing moon, should it be removed or baptized? You answer as best you can. Then comes the written exam. 47 questions, handwritten in Gothic script so dense it looks like each letter has a toothache of its own. You manage to answer most of them using a combination of logic, educated guessing, and outright fictional Latin. At last, the final trial, a live demonstration. You're led into a chilly chamber. A dummy head sits in a chair stuffed with pig jaws. An examiner watches as you identify 3 problem teeth, remove one, and fill another with a compound you improvise from pine sap, bone dust, and crushed sage. He sniffs the filling, he nods. You pass, he says, pending one more detail. He hands you a robe. It's stiff dark blue, embroidered with the guild sigil, a smiling skull and crossed forceps. You are now officially a member. You celebrate with flatbread and diluted wine. But later that evening, as the stars emerge, you find Gervais staring into the fire. He doesn't speak for a long while. Something's wrong, he finally says. He produces a letter, anonymous, delivered by a child with no shoes and a knowing smile. It reads, "He sleeps again, the infected dreams return, be ready." There is no signature, just a symbol, a circle within a tooth. You remember Lady Sangatha, the House of 7 Doors, the whispered rumors of teeth that hum, of molars with memory, of nobles who grind more than just grain. That night, sleep doesn't come easy. When it does, it brings dreams of shadowy mouths filled with whispers, of teeth moving on their own, and of Gervais, pulling a scroll from his sleeve and whispering your name in a room with no walls. You awaken with your hand clutched around your forceps. And a note under your blanket, don't let them sleep too long. The road ahead feels different now. The trees lean in just a little more. The wind carries whispers you can't quite parse. Even the cartwheels creak like they're trying to say something. Gervais doesn't hum. He just walks beside the donkey, silent, staring straight ahead. By midday, you reach a small village at the edge of a great garden. It's a tranquil place, too tranquil. No toothaches, no cries, no toddlers with beans in their gums, just peace. Which is suspicious. At the center of it all is a high-walled orchard filled with lemon trees, dozens of them, blooming out of season, vibrant and wrong. And there, pruning one with a rusty sickle, is a man in simple robes, bare feet dusted in ash, eyes closed as he trims. That's him, Gervais whispers, the monk. You approach. He does not open his eyes. Welcome, he says, you have pain. You assure him you're fine. No, he corrects, you have pain, you carry it in your pouch, in your hands, in your dreams. He finally opens his eyes. They are yellow-gray, not unkind. Would you like a lemon? You accept. It's oddly warm and fragrant. You hold it as he gestures for you to sit. The monk introduces himself as Brother Heron. He used to be a physician, then a healer, then a hermit. Now he calls himself a gardener of pain. You suspect metaphors. Gervais suspects opium. Brother Heron begins to talk, slowly, gently. He speaks of teeth as memory keepers, of molars as stone tablets for the soul. He insists that when someone dies with unfinished regret, it settles in their jaw. Pull enough teeth, he says, and you'll pull a story. You want to laugh, but you don't. You remember the mayor's phantom molar, the singer's dreams, the girl with the plum-wood toothbrush. Brother Heron teaches you a new technique, pain mapping. He guides your hand to your own jaw. Press here, and you remember embarrassment. Press there, and your vision flashes with anger. He shows you how to read the color of gums, how a purple edge signals fear, how receding enamel may be a sign of loss. You don't know whether he's mad or brilliant. But when a young woman arrives with a crooked incisor and a mouth full of uncertainty, you let him guide you. You don't just extract the tooth, you speak to it first. You say, you've done your time. You say, thank you. The woman weeps, you don't know why, but the ache lifts. Gervais keeps his distance. This smells like trouble, he mutters, and lemons. At dusk, Brother Heron gives you a gift, a scroll wrapped in beeswax cloth. These, he says, are diagrams of jaws you haven't seen yet. You ask what he means. He just smiles. Rest, then go. The next village forgets their own names. Help them remember. That night, you and Gervais camp under a lemon tree. The scent is soothing. You dream of teeth floating gently down a stream, each inscribed with a single word. One reads, forgive. Another, soon. Morning comes with the sudden realization that Gervais has redecorated the cart. The tools are laid out in perfect rows. The cloths are freshly boiled. There's even a little chalkboard tied to the side that reads, no extractions without enlightenment. Marketing, he says, chewing a piece of lemon bark, we're spiritual now. You sigh and load the cart. Today's village is nestled beside a river that doesn't appear on any map. The houses are made of pale clay, their windows covered in patterned silk. You're greeted by a council of elders, all barefoot, all smiling the strained smiles of people who know something you don't. Their problem? A decree, issued by their newly converted ruler, a grand edict carved in ivory and nailed to the central shrine. Let no beast suffer under my rule, no creature harmed, no meal made of pain, and let no tooth be removed unless it falls naturally like a leaf in autumn. Ashoka-style nonviolence, adapted awkwardly to dental care. It's chaos. People with abscesses are chewing nettles until their gums bleed. One man is trying to meditate his molar away. Another has taken to whispering bedtime stories to his wisdom tooth, hoping it will ift off peacefully. You're ushered into the home of a boy with a swollen cheek, feverish eyes, and a deep infection. His mother begs you to help. But quietly, she adds, they'll report us. You perform the extraction under a thatched lean-to, using clove oil, candlelight, and one hand over the boy's mouth. When the molar comes free, the relief is instant, but you must bury it. That's part of the ritual now. You dig a small hole beside the river and place the tooth gently inside. The boy whispers goodbye. You almost believe it. The villagers begin bringing you secret patients. Each time, they insist on burial. Some even bring herbs, poems, tiny songs to ease the tooth's passage. You're not sure whether you're healing or conducting a funeral. Gervais, meanwhile, tries to reason with the elders. He explains that molars don't want to stay, that bicuspids long for release. He stages a dramatic reading of the tooth who yearned for the sky. They aren't convinced. Later, a small crowd gathers to debate whether tooth extraction violates the spirit of nonviolence if the tooth is, quote, already considering departure. One elder proposes allowing extractions only after a full moon and a signed confession from the tooth itself. That night, you meet the monk who started it all. She's young, soft-spoken, and covered in faint ash markings. She invites you into her hut, where the air smells of saffron and worry. She explains her vision teeth as sacred vessels, pain as a teacher. She means no harm, only reverence. You ask, what about suffering? She pauses. Then, we are not meant to escape it, only understand it. You leave quietly. On your way back to camp, you pass a girl sitting by the river, humming to her loose incisor. She turns to you and asks, do you think it'll miss me? You crouch beside her. I think it's ready. She nods. The next morning, the decree is slightly amended. Tooth removal is now allowed if the molar has renounced its ego. No one knows what that means, but it's progress. You pack up. Gervais waves to the elders. You bury one last tooth. And as you walk on, the monk's words linger like mint on your breath. The hills roll gently under your feet. The road is kind for once. And best of all, there's not a single jaw screaming your name. You and Gervais make camp by an abandoned watchtower. The sunset is gold. The tea is warm. The silence is suspicious. Gervais breaks it. "So," he says, tossing a pebble at the fire, "what exactly do you plan to do with 800 retired war elephants?" You blink. He grins. The king in the West retired the entire elephant cavalry, didn't want blood on his legacy, but now he's got 800 tons of tusk and toenails eating everything south of the vineyard. You wait for the punchline. "There isn't one," Gervais says. "They sent for help, someone practical, someone toothsome." You arrive 3 days later. The kingdom of Balanpur is warm, lush, and unmistakably full of elephants. They roam the fields like slow-moving boulders. Some nap in public baths. Others pull down fruit stands for fun. One sits in a granary and refuses to leave. Their teeth are part of the problem. War elephants need strong molars for crunching roots, hauling chains, biting if necessary. Now, without battle, their diet has softened. Fruit, sugarcane, spoiled rice. Their tusks overgrow, their molars rot. They develop cavities the size of soup bowls and infections that make them trumpet in agony at midnight. You are, by unanimous vote, made chief toothman of the royal herd. Your tools are laughably small. You improvise. You fashion long-handled forceps from plow hooks. You repurpose a blacksmith's tongs. You design a sling system using silk ropes and 2 palm trees. Your first patient is an elderly bull named Mahadeva. He's cooperative until the rinse. You squirt clove-infused water into his mouth, and he sprays it back in your face with a sneeze that rattles a stable. Eventually, with the help of 5 handlers and a very brave goat, you remove the infected molar. Mahadeva sighs like a monk. He naps for 10 hours. Word spreads. Soon, elephants arrive from neighboring districts. You see one with a cracked tusk, another with tooth decay so bad you can smell it from across the paddock. One refuses treatment unless Gervais sings. He does, badly. You develop a routine. Sedate with fermented banana mash. Floss with knotted hemp. Rinse using a hollowed gourd and half a liter of ginger wine. Pack cavities with a mixture of ash, honey, and pounded turmeric. It works, mostly. But politics return. A nobleman claims the elephants should be put to practical use as plow beasts, log haulers, even entertainers. They've served in war, he says. They can serve in peace. You argue for their dignity. You cite tusk damage, gum disease, and elephant boredom. You write a short pamphlet on the maintenance and moral considerations of elderly pachyderms. It's ignored. So, you stage a demonstration. You organize the elephants, 40 of them, into a slow, synchronized parade. Each one shows off their newly treated teeth by smiling, or trying to. They flap ears, they trumpet softly, one bows. The crowd loves it. The court is moved. The elephants are granted retirement gardens, wide meadows, mud baths, occasional foot rubs. Your work here is done. As you leave, Mahadeva walks beside you for half a mile. He plucks a melon from a tree and drops it at your feet. You eat together in silence. Back on the road, Gervais pats the cart. You ever think about opening a zoo? You don't answer. But that night your dreams are full of warm trunks, slow chewing, and laughter echoing across fields of mint. You return to the road feeling strangely light, like a molar after its final tug. Gervais whistles an off-key tune about Denton and destiny. The sun is kind. The breeze carries the scent of cardamom and faraway laundry. Today, you travel not to a patient, but to a place with legends, a path walked by saints, poets, and once, famously, a woman who flossed with her hair and lived to be 92. You are on pilgrimage. Not a religious one, precisely. More historical, ash-covered, sandal-wearing, inward-looking. Your goal: to visit the 7 sacred springs where early dentists, called jaw sages, supposedly discovered the secrets of oral harmony. Gervais, naturally, has never heard of them. But the scroll brother Heron gave you mentions them each tied to an emotion: peace, sorrow, rage, regret, joy, shame, and forgetting. You reach the first spring by dusk. It's tucked inside a grove of banyans, the air thick with bird calls and damp leaves. The water bubbles gently. You kneel, drink. The taste is soft like memory diluted with time. You sit for an hour, saying nothing. You leave a small molar on the stones wrapped in thread. The next spring takes a full day to find. You navigate goat paths, riverbanks, and a bridge guarded by a woman who will only let you pass if you correctly identify a fossilized premolar. You do. This spring is colder, sorrowful. You see names carved into nearby bark, hundreds, some faded, some fresh. You add one, not yours, just Kevin. Each spring carries a mood. One is surrounded by black bees that do not sting. One has teeth at the bottom, hundreds, shining faintly like fish. One reflects your face, except your mouth is closed, no matter how wide you open it. At the 5th spring, you meet a man. He's wearing silk sandals and humming through his nose. His teeth are flawless. You ask who he is. Pilgrim, he replies, same as you. He offers you dried apricots. You share stories. He speaks of a queen who extracted her own wisdom tooth out of pride. You tell him of Lady Isabel. You both laugh. Then he says, the 6th spring is dangerous. You nod. It is. You find it in a cave. The water is red, not blood, just minerals, but it feels like blood. The walls hum. You step in, feel warmth, shame. You remember every tooth you pulled too quickly, every time you winced at the smell, every joke you told to avoid saying, I don't know if this one will survive. You cry, just a little. The 7th spring isn't a spring at all. It's a clearing, flat stone, a bowl carved in the center, empty. Gervais stands beside you, squinting. Where's the water? You shrug, you sit, and you forget for a moment what you came here to learn. When you rise, your jaw feels lighter. You walk on. Later that evening, Gervais catches up. So, you did the whole barefoot wisdom thing, feel holier. You think. You smile. And for once, your own teeth don't ache. The road winds downhill now, into a valley of sun-drenched fields and plump chickens that regard you with suspicious wisdom. There's a peaceful rhythm to the village below, women pounding grain, men weaving baskets, children shouting at geese. You'd enjoy it more if you weren't here to fix a financial disaster. It begins, predictably, with Gervais. We need to fund more pilgrimages, he explains, pulling a scroll from his satchel. So I convinced the Council of Molarian Ethics to implement a temple tax for the public good and floss. You pause. There's a Council of Molarian Ethics? He nods solemnly. There is now. The idea was simple. A tiny tithe, 1 copper per month, for anyone with more than 10 teeth. The money would go toward building a shrine to Saint Apollonia and funding rural molar outreach. It backfired immediately. Half the village refuses to pay, citing religious confusion and freedom of cheek. The other half pays, but insists it grants them moral superiority and dental immunity. Within a week, 3 fistfights break out over molar counts. One man files his own teeth into fangs to dodge the tax. A baker claims her dough has divine exemption. A monk demands a refund, claiming he lost 2 incisors during a particularly moving sermon. You're summoned to mediate. The temple, an unfinished dome with scaffolding and a mildly cursed bell, stands as the battleground. Angry villagers wave toothbrushes like torches. Gervais is trying to read from a sacred codex he clearly wrote himself. You step forward. You suggest a compromise, a one-time donation in exchange for a tooth serenity blessing performed with mint oil and soothing chants. It's received with cautious curiosity. You create a ritual, a bowl of warm water, a string of dried molars tied like prayer beads. Each person touches the bowl, whispers a tooth-related wish, and receives a gentle rinse and a card that reads, "This jaw is at peace." Participation is enthusiastic. One farmer weeps after blessing his last remaining tooth. A teenager donates a milk tooth he's worn on a string since childhood. An old woman demands you bless her wooden teeth and then tries to adopt you. The shrine is completed. The dome is tiled with enamel-colored stones. Inside, a mural shows Saint Apollonia facing a roaring lion and calmly offering it clove oil. At the dedication, the bell rings once, slightly off-key. The villagers cheer. A choir of children sings a vaguely tooth-themed hymn in C major. And the tax, quietly retired. In its place, you institute something simpler, a dental donation jar beside the shrine, labeled "For the Gums of Tomorrow." It's usually full of coin and occasionally dried fruit. That night, Gervais counts the donations and sighs. "Not as much as I expected," he says, "but enough." He hands you a folded note, unsigned. "Today I smiled without fear. You've changed something." You look at the shrine glowing in the firelight. You smile too. Then wince. One of your own molars is twinging. You make a note to look at it later. You're sipping spiced broth in a riverside inn, just starting to consider a nap, when the door bangs open and a boy stumbles in, clutching a scroll and gasping like someone who's just learned how taxes work. "An ambassador, sirs," he pants, "from the West, from Greece. He's here, with a cave problem." Gervais blinks. "We're being summoned by philosophy?" You arrive at the appointed location the next morning, a limestone ridge riddled with caves, some carved by nature, some by very bored monks. Inside one of them, lit only by torches and the occasional glint of polished bronze, stands a man in sandals and far too many scarves. He turns. "Greetings. I am Demetrius of Syracuse. I require cultural interpretation." You introduce yourself. He squints. "You're the tooth man?" You nod. "Among other things." He smiles. "Good, because one of my assistants has swallowed a scroll tube and now claims to hear ancient dental prophecies." You stare. "What?" He sighs. "Greek diplomacy." Inside the cave, you meet the assistant, a lanky man with wild eyes, clutching his midsection and whispering, "The incisors are watching." You don't know how much of this is medical and how much is Mediterranean flair, but you get to work. A mild emetic, mint tea and panic, a soft belly rub, and eventually a burp so long it echoes. The tube returns. You do not open it. Demetrius applauds. "Excellent. Now the real reason I summoned you." He leads you deeper into the cave, to a stone wall covered in carvings, teeth, jaws, and what appears to be a dentist riding an elephant. "We think this is your ancestor," Demetrius whispers, "or your role." You frown. "What role?" He gestures to an inscription, "The carer of chewing, the whisperer to bone." He explains his theory. Long ago, when Greek traders reached the subcontinent, they encountered your dental forebears, healers, who treated oral pain with herbs, chants, and poetic threats. This cave, he insists, is proof of an ancient dental exchange program. You try not to laugh. Then he shows you the tooth. It's embedded in the rock, massive, fossilized, not human, possibly not even animal, yet shaped with startling precision. Demetrius wants your opinion. You kneel, touch the enamel, feel something. Heat, echo. You can't say. Could it be, Demetrius whispers, that the ancients believed knowledge was stored in teeth? You consider this. You remember Brother Heron, the whispering molars, the scroll under your pillow. You nod slowly. That night there's a feast. Goat, dates, wine, roasted tubers carved into the shapes of canines. Demetrius toasts you. The assistant is no longer hallucinating. Gervais flirts badly with a flute player. As the night winds down, Demetrius pulls you aside. "You may not be a philosopher," he says, "but you understand pain. That is universal." You exchange gifts. He gives you a coin with Hermes on one side and a molar on the other. You give him a spare pelican tool, engraved with your initials. As you leave the cave at dawn, the wind whistles through the stones, soft, rhythmic, like distant teeth chattering in delight. The city of Lumbaya is in full riot. Not the burning buildings kind, this is a festival riot, loud and oddly polite, where people shout and jostle with wild eyes and powdered faces, desperate to glimpse something small, sacred, and almost certainly fake. You've barely stepped off the cart when a woman grabs your sleeve. "Have you seen it?" she demands. "The tooth?" You blink. "Which one?" She gasps. "The one, the incisor of the enlightened one. It glows, it sings." Gervais leans in. "Does it floss itself?" She ignores him and vanishes into the crowd. Welcome to the Festival of the Holy Tooth, a 3-week affair centered around a single relic, housed in a shimmering, many-locked box, carried through the streets by monks with veils and extremely tight schedules. The tooth in question allegedly belonged to a divine figure. Some say a king, others say a sage. Gervais says it probably belonged to a very well-fed goat. You're invited, as master of tooth affairs, to join the inner procession. It begins humbly, a river washing, a garland ceremony, soft chanting. Then the drums start. Suddenly, the tooth box is hoisted onto a golden cart shaped like a lion with dentures. Children toss flower petals. Old women wave incense sticks that smell like roasted garlic. A group of men dance in a circle, imitating tooth extractions in interpretive fashion. One faints dramatically. You trail the box for hours, listening to pilgrims whisper stories. The tooth once healed a dying man who merely looked at it. The tooth has predicted monsoons with 67% accuracy. The tooth sings lullabies when the moon is new. You don't say anything, but you do notice. No one has ever seen it, not in decades, not even the monks. You're taken to the temple for inspection. Inside it's silent, cool. The box is placed before you. 15 locks. You're told you may open it, but only if your heart is free of envy, plaque, and political bias. You decline. Instead, you offer to examine the replica kept in the back chamber. It is, as you suspected, a molar. Human, very clean, possibly female. You gently test the enamel. The tooth hums faintly, not magic, just excellent resonance, possibly due to the stone casing. Gervais takes notes, good for acoustics, bad for biting. You suggest a compromise to the temple elders. Display the replica, preserve the mystery of the original. They agree, so long as you bless it. You do. With mint oil and a short poem. O blessed bicuspid, strong and white, give us dreams and painless bite. The crowd erupts. The next day, you're honored in a parade. Children wear molar masks. One boy gives you a drawing of Saint Molar riding a lion made of floss. You keep it. That night, you're offered a gift, a box of festival teeth. Not relics, just donations. Teeth people gave up in hope, in pain, or in thanks. You accept it. It rattles as you walk. Later, by the fire, Gervais holds one up to the light. This one looks like it heard the lullaby, he says. You don't answer. But deep in your pouch, the real gift from the temple sits quiet, a single carved token bearing the symbol of a molar, wrapped in silk that smells like clove and old prayers. You've spent weeks on the road with nothing but open skies and steadily growing fame. People now recognize you by the way you wear your apron, or the gentle clink of tools in your satchel. Some call you master, others simply the tooth. And now you've been summoned, not to a festival, nor a noble's manor, but to a cliffside monastery where the walls speak. Literally. You stand before a wind-scraped plateau, staring at a line of inscriptions etched into the stone, stretching for miles. Phrases, commands, reflections all about teeth, morality, and strange dietary rules involving lentils. This is one of the great edict walls, commissioned by a long-gone emperor with a dental fixation and a fondness for moral guidance. Each carving offers advice like, "Speak sweetly, lest the molar grind. Let no tongue wound what the teeth protect. Chew well and judge slowly." You're not here to read them, you're here to fix them. The monks escort you into a cold, echoing chamber where a single line of script runs in tight, neat curves across the wall, except for one section. There, a dozen letters are different, chiseled wrong, reversed. It reads, "Punish all smiles." You frown, that's not right. The monks nod, the masons were drunk. You're asked to repair it, not with tools, but with interpretation. You must decide what it was meant to say. You consult old texts, monk traditions, even a cracked tooth you find wedged in a prayer niche. You suggest a correction. Polish all smiles. They agree. You're given a hammer and a chisel, guided by the oldest monk blind, but with a steady grip. Together, you scrape away centuries, slowly, gently. As you work, villagers come to watch. Some chant, others offer teeth as tribute, hoping to be included in the next edict. You accept a few, out of politeness. Later, a dispute arises. One of the new masons wants to add a new phrase, commemorating your visit. Let all jaws be still in his presence. You politely decline. Instead, you propose something simpler, something humble. May each tooth know peace. The monks chisel it in themselves. That evening, a light rain falls. You walk along the cliff, reading the other edicts, some wise, some strange. Avoid whispering while chewing. Beware the man with clean gums and dirty hands. A sharp tongue wears down the jaw. One inscription simply says, "Smile." It confuses the devils. You like that one. By the next morning, your correction is already being quoted by pilgrims. A toothsmith from the north offers you a carved inkstone in thanks. It bears a single kanji meaning bite. You tuck it into your pouch. And as you leave, you pass a child tracing the words with her finger, mouthing them slowly. May each tooth know peace. She smiles. It's well past midnight when you arrive at the royal archives. The city is quiet, too quiet, like the kind of silence that follows a particularly bad harvest or a wildly successful scandal. The guards at the gate nod grimly. You're waved in without questions. Inside, the halls smell of old paper and petrified sandalwood. You're led by candlelight through winding corridors, past statues missing their eyes, and shelves that groan under the weight of forgotten truths. You're not here for surgery. You're here to read. The royal archivist, a woman named Mahira, meets you in the inner chamber. She's ancient, possibly fossilized, and wears a necklace made of catalog tags. She gestures to a locked cabinet. No ink may leave this room, she warns, no copies, no storytelling. You nod. She unlocks it. Inside, scrolls. Dozens, maybe hundreds, each labeled with a strange marking, some resembling molars, others like a jaw mid-scream. Gervais whispers, "Tooth runes. We've found the motherlode." These are the dental decrees, Ashoka's personal records, not the public edicts carved on pillars. These are the private ones, unpublished, possibly retracted, possibly buried on purpose. You read for hours. One scroll describes a failed campaign to standardize tooth cleaning throughout the empire. It included government-issued bristle twigs, mandated morning rinses with diluted salt water, a bizarre fine for public gnashing, Another outlines a massive census of dental health. Villagers were ranked from radiant grin to chewer of sorrow. The project collapsed after too many nobles refused inspection. There's a scroll labeled, "On Molar Loyalty." It theorizes that molars may retain emotional resonance, especially in rulers. That lost wisdom teeth could be ritually burned to prevent dissent. You're not sure whether this is mysticism or metaphor. Neither are the scribes. One particularly odd document appears to be a recipe. It includes crushed pearls, goat tallow, 7 drops of elephant saliva. It is labeled paste for diplomats. Gervais reads over your shoulder. I knew they were eating that stuff. But not all scrolls are humorous. One tells of a failed treatment, Ashoka's youngest son, afflicted with a jaw infection. Every dentist tried. None succeeded. The boy died. The emperor stopped commissioning public extractions the next month. You pause, close that scroll carefully. Near dawn, Mahira returns. You've seen enough, she says. You agree. But as you leave, she presses one last thing into your hand, a tiny parchment, folded into a tooth shape. Inside is a phrase, handwritten in ancient script. May the root rot before the kindness. She doesn't explain. You don't ask. Back in the cart, Gervais stares at the parchment. Ashoka was complicated. You nod. Do we tell people? You shake your head. You tuck the note into your pouch, beside the lemon token, the carved coin, the plumwood toothbrush sketch, and the floss made of prayer flags. No one needs to know everything. Some truths, like old teeth, are best left buried. Morning breaks with a horn blast, and a flurry of anxious monks shouting about seating charts. You've been summoned to the long-promised Great Council of Jaman, an event meant to unify the region's toothsmiths, tincture peddlers, tongue lecturers, and even a few wayward poets who claim to speak enamel. The venue is a hilltop pagoda with sweeping views, polished wood floors, and, unfortunately, not enough chairs. You arrive to chaos. A delegate from the Southern Order refuses to sit beside a gum herbalist he once accused of peppermint fraud. A trio of orthodontic mystics are offended by the presence of anything metal. One tooth alchemist insists he brought the original scroll of Saint Apollonia and demands it be placed on a pedestal or he walks. You're shown to your seat. It's a crate of dried lentils. Gervais grins. Luxury. The council begins with noble intentions. First topic, standardizing the dental oath. Arguments erupt immediately. Should it include a vow to never flinch at the stench? Should molars be considered citizens of the mouth? Is it ethical to pull a tooth that hasn't yet declared its alignment? You try to speak. You're interrupted by a man juggling bicuspid models and quoting poetry. Every jaw has its thorn, he says. No one laughs. The second topic, herbal rinses. The peppermint faction claims exclusivity. The ginger root faction claims ancestral rights. A third party insists all rinses must be sun-blessed before use. A scuffle breaks out near the refreshment table. You quietly drink your tea. By afternoon, the council has achieved 3 minor injuries. One scandal involving a mislabeled tooth diagram. 0 agreements. Then, mercifully, a break. You wander the courtyard and find the youngest delegate, a boy barely 15, seated cross-legged with a carved wooden jaw in his lap. I came to learn, he says, but they only want to argue. You nod. You sit beside him. You show him the scroll from Ashoka's archive, the one with the failed toothbrush census. He reads. He laughs. They tried to tax gnashing? You shrug. People tried. He turns to you. What would you say to them? You think. Then you speak. Teeth aren't laws, they're stories. You don't command a story, you listen to it. He nods slowly. The next session opens with fresh tension, now about ceremonial attire. But the boy stands. He walks to the front, he bows. And he says, "Before we dress a tooth, maybe we should ask it what it's been through." Silence. Then, slowly, someone claps. Not many. But enough. You don't stay for the rest. You leave quietly, Gervais beside you, the wind warm against your neck. "Think they'll sort it out?" he asks. You shake your head, but someone will someday. Later, under the stars, you find a note tucked into your pouch. "Thank you for listening, a future molar whisperer." You smile. One small, calm, perfectly centered smile. You're deep in the hills now, traveling roads so narrow they're more suggestion than path. The sky hangs low. The air smells of moss, overripe berries, and something else, something faintly squawky. The town you enter is small, unassuming, suspiciously quiet, until a voice calls out from an upper window. "Is that the parrot, dentist?" You blink. A woman leans out, pointing directly at your shoulder. Gervais turns. "What?" And that's when you realize there's a parrot on your cloak. A green one, with one eye and a mouthful of incredible dental vocabulary. Bicuspid blasphemy, it shrieks, "Who flossed with turnip?" The villagers erupt in applause. You're told the bird's name is Cosimo. He arrived 2 days ago. No one knows where from, but he's been lecturing non-stop about molar care, jaw alignment, and the moral failing of canker sores. "Your bird saved my marriage," says a man with tears in his eyes. You try to explain Cosimo isn't yours. The parrot disagrees. "Assistant," it yells, "bring the floss chalice." Gervais doubles over, laughing. You're offered lodging, and by lodging you mean a small temple where Cosimo now resides, perched above the altar, surrounded by offerings of dried fruit and unworn dentures. You attempt to leave. Cosimo flies after you. He bites Gervais lightly and insists on returning to the cart. You have no choice but to allow him. Thus begins your new life, with a parrot who critiques your technique. During extractions, he perches on your shoulder and mutters, "Too aggressive, that molar had dreams." He insists on inspecting fillings. He sings molar lullabies. He tells children terrifying bedtime stories. The enamel that screamed. The plaque that became Pope. Never trust a premolar with a secret. You begin to suspect he was trained by monks, or possibly a disillusioned dentist turned hermit. Either way, the public adores him. Crowds gather just to hear him say things like, "Brush the tongue, ye cowards." "Floss before battle or during." I knew a bicuspid who lied once. It shattered. Soon, he's more popular than you. You start seeing graffiti, "Cosimo cares." A child gifts him a tiny crown made of foil. He wears it proudly. One evening, Gervais finds you by the fire, staring at your tools. He's good, you admit. He's the best, Gervais sighs. You share a flask. Cosimo sings the national anthem of Gumsylvania. You don't know the words, but it's surprisingly moving. As the fire crackles, Cosimo lands on your lap and whispers, "You've been kinder to molars lately." You nod. "I approve," he adds, then bites your thumb. Affectionately. And so you ride on, legendary dentist, weary traveler, and now, bird host. The wind carries your fame. And Cosimo's voice. Beware the wisdom tooth that speaks in riddles. You've seen your fair share of jaw trouble. But nothing prepares you for succession. The summons arrives folded in gold-stamped vellum, bearing the royal seal of House Mandibula, a sprawling noble family known for their wealth, their war horses, and their alarmingly poor dental hygiene. The patriarch, Lord Crasson, is dying, or at least very tired. He's decided it's time to name his heir. But there's a catch. Tradition demands that the chosen successor must possess the most trustworthy bite, a right rooted in some ancient belief that a firm jaw reflects a firm heart. It's ceremonial nonsense, and yet you are summoned to verify the candidates. You arrive to chaos. 7 heirs, each worse than the last. First is Ulrich, strong jaw, weak ethics, claims he chews rocks for breakfast. Next, Dorel, charming, intelligent, and missing all but 6 teeth, though she's installed replacements made of polished seashell. Third, twins, Hamlin and Hamlet, insist on being examined simultaneously. One laughs too much, the other gnaws on prayer beads. Then there's Marcian, insists molars are a futile illusion, and refuses to open his mouth without a written contract. Fifth is Petra, a scholar, brings charts, has excellent canines, terrible breath, claims gum health is political. Lastly, Sylvan, youngest, quiet, still has baby teeth, refuses to lose them, calls them ancestral anchors. Lord Crasson watches the exam with a sort of dribbling disinterest. You get the sense he barely remembers his own teeth. The testing begins. You inspect each heir. Bite alignment. Enamel strength. Clench capacity. Trust resonance, a metric you invent on the spot. Petra scores highest, but Ulrich challenges her to a jaw duel, which ends in a snapped molar and a dramatic fainting. Dorel withdraws to avoid bite bias. Hamlin and Hamlet bite each other and declare it a draw. That leaves Sylvan. You almost dismiss him until he asks, softly, what does it mean to bite with honor? You blink. He opens his mouth. His baby teeth are worn, yes, but neat, honest. No hidden filings, no sharpened points. You declare him the winner. The court is shocked. Lord Crasson shrugs and says, sure, whatever. Just pick someone before I start grinding in my sleep. Sylvan is crowned with a laurel of floss. You're awarded a medal, the Order of the Bicuspids, and a chest of gold, half of which you immediately donate to a fund for peasant molar care. Later, Gervais asks why you chose the boy. You smile. He didn't bite, he asked. That night Cosimo croaks, heir today, gone tomorrow. You all pretend not to hear it. The palace courtyard is quieter now. The festivals have faded, the diplomats gone, and the endless line of aching jaws has slowed to a trickle. You've patched molars, blessed bicuspids, and coached heirs through crises of clench. There's nothing left to extract except maybe peace. Lord Crasson is gone, Sylvan reigns, and you've been granted a cottage in the outer gardens. It's a strange life. Your days begin with tea and tooth sketches. You keep a record now, not just treatments but personalities. The incisor of the boy who feared mirrors, the premolar with 3 roots that whispered during rain, the wisdom tooth shaped like a crescent moon. You draw them, annotate, sometimes you add poetry. You've become gentle. Cosimo still visits. He's started nesting in your bookshelf and critiquing your handwriting. Gervais is building a side business, antique dental relics, totally real. You help him test the wax seals. One morning, you wake to find a familiar figure waiting by the pond. Lady Isabel. She looks older, or maybe just less furious. I came for a walk, she says, but I suppose I came for something else too. You nod. She gestures to the garden. I think I'm ready. She opens her mouth, points. A back molar cracked since your exile. She's kept it all this time. You don't ask why. You work in silence, warm water, clove oil, a practiced pull. The tooth comes free without fuss. She holds it up to the light. Then, without a word, drops it in the pond. You don't see her again. Later that day, you walk the garden path. lined with medicinal herbs and shy cats. You pass the shrine to Apollonia. The mural now shows you tiny in the background, tongs in hand, watching a child laugh. Someone added it last week. You sit on the bench, watch petals drift across the pond. One floats near a familiar molar. The sky dims gently, wind through reeds, a rustle in the jasmine. You close your eyes, and the garden hums, soft, steady, like a jaw at rest. You feel it before you hear it, a faint rhythmic sound like distant footsteps on packed earth, or perhaps hooves. No, heavier. The palace gates creak open, and standing there, just as the sun splits the clouds, is an elephant. Old, massive, gentle. You recognize him instantly. It's Mahadeva. His ears flutter slightly as he approaches, each footfall measured, deliberate. A single monk walks beside him, offering fruit from a woven basket and singing something slow and sweet in a language you barely remember. The court pauses, even the birds. You step forward. Mahadeva stops before you, lowers his head, opens his mouth just enough. You smile. A molar, the last one, the one you spared. It's loose now, yellowed, tilted like a tower on tired soil. You know what he's asking. Gervais appears at your side, silent for once. Cosimo flutters down from a balcony and lands respectfully on the garden wall. You place a cloth on the stone path. You prepare your tools, no need for show, just steadiness. Mahadeva kneels. Your hand is sure, your heart less so. But gently, with a grace born of decades, you remove the tooth. It falls into your palm with a sound like rain meeting pond water. Mahadeva breathes out slow, deep, free. You wrap the tooth in silk and place it into a wooden bowl lined with herbs. The monk bows, leads the elephant away. You stand there for a long time, watching him disappear down the path, past the shrine, past the plum trees, past everything. You walk the garden one last time, past the bench, past the stream, and then, at the palace gates, you turn. One child waits there, clutching a tooth in a small cloth. "Will you help me?" they ask. You nod. Of course. You kneel. The story continues. Let your breath slow now, you've walked so far. Across gardens and courts, festivals and fields, through pain and laughter and the quiet kindness of gentle work. You've held jawbones and stories, you've listened, you've pulled what needed pulling and left the rest to heal. The tools are quiet now. The pouch is closed. The fire is low. Outside, an old elephant sleeps in soft straw. Somewhere in the dark, a parrot dreams of molars and crowns. And you, well, you rest now too, beneath the fig leaves, beneath the stars, safe in the hush between footfalls. Let the hum of the garden guide you down. Let your jaws soften, your breath deepen. You did well. You did enough. Sleep.